Grace looked up. In the chaos of firefighters and paramedics and police officers, she had become invisible again. Just another face in the crowd. Just another person in the way. She stood up slowly, letting the blanket fall from her shoulders, and stepped backward into the gathering crowd of onlookers. A woman with a phone was still recording everything. A news van was pulling up to the curb. People were talking rapidly about what they had witnessed, the words tumbling over each other. "Did you see that? She just ran right in." Who was she? Someone said she was homeless. Grace kept moving backward, away from the lights and the attention and the questions she could not answer. Her hands were burned. Her clothes were ruined. Everything hurt. But the boy was safe. She had saved him. And that was all that mattered. She disappeared into the Portland evening, not knowing that someone had captured the entire rescue on video. She did not know that by morning, millions of people would watch a homeless woman risk her life for a stranger's child. She did not know that her act of courage would change everything. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 years, she had felt like a person again. She had mattered. She had made a difference. And as she walked away into the darkness, Grace Mitchell allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a purpose for her broken life after all. Thomas Bennett stood in the hospital hallway with his hands pressed against the wall, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face pale with terror. He had been in a board meeting across town when his nanny called, her voice breaking as she told him there was a fire at the apartment building where his sister lived with his son. By the time he arrived, Oliver was already in the emergency room being treated for smoke inhalation. "He's going to be fine," the doctor said, and those 5 words nearly brought Thomas to his knees with relief. Someone got him out quickly. Another few minutes and... The doctor did not finish the sentence, but Thomas understood. His son was alive because a stranger had run into a burning building to save him. Thomas entered the hospital room where Oliver lay sleeping, an oxygen mask on his small face, his blonde hair dark with soot. Thomas pulled a chair close to the bed and took his son's tiny hand in his own. His eyes filled with tears he had been holding back since the phone call. Oliver was all he had left. His wife, Jennifer, had died from cancer 2 years ago, and raising Oliver alone had been the hardest thing Thomas had ever done. The thought of losing him too was unbearable. "Mr. Bennett." A police officer appeared in the doorway. "I know this is a difficult time, but we need to ask you some questions about what happened." Thomas nodded and stepped into the hallway, leaving Oliver under the watchful eye of a nurse. The officer explained that the fire had started from an electrical issue in his sister's apartment. His sister, Caroline, had been at work. The nanny had taken Oliver there that afternoon because Caroline had promised to watch him while the nanny had a dental appointment. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be routine. "The woman who saved your son," the officer said carefully. "Do you know who she is?" Thomas shook his head. "I heard someone pulled him out. A neighbor." "No, sir. According to witnesses, she was homeless. She ran into the building before firefighters arrived, went up to the 3rd floor, and brought your son out. Then she disappeared before anyone could get her information." Thomas felt his throat tighten. A homeless woman had saved Oliver's life. While everyone else stood and watched, while everyone else waited for professionals, a woman with nothing had risked everything. "I need to find her," Thomas said. "I need to thank her." The officer looked uncomfortable. "That might be difficult. The homeless population moves around a lot. Most of them don't want attention. But..." He pulled out his phone. "Someone recorded the rescue. The video is already going viral. You should see this." The officer played the video. Thomas watched a thin woman in a stained jacket run into the burning building without hesitation. The footage was shaky, shot from across the street, but it captured everything. Minutes later, the woman emerged through the smoke carrying a small body. She knelt and checked on the child, on Oliver, with such tenderness that Thomas felt his heart break. Then paramedics rushed in, and in the confusion, the woman simply walked away. "Can you send me that video?" Thomas asked, his voice rough with emotion. "It's everywhere already," the officer replied. "Someone posted it online an hour ago. It has over 1 million views." Thomas spent the night in Oliver's hospital room, watching his son sleep and replaying the video over and over. By morning, the video had 10 million views. News stations were picking up the story. People across the country were sharing it with captions like "True Hero" and "Faith in Humanity Restored" and "Angel Among Us." But nobody knew who she was. Thomas called his assistant at 6 in the morning. "Cancel all my meetings for the next week. I need you to contact every homeless shelter, every soup kitchen, every outreach program in Portland. I'm offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to the woman who saved my son." His assistant, normally unflappable, sounded shocked. "$20,000? Mr. Bennett, are you sure?" "Make it $50,000, Thomas said. "And contact the news stations. I want to go on air. I want everyone in Portland to know I'm looking for her." By noon, Thomas's face was on every news channel in Oregon. He stood at a press conference outside the hospital, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, and spoke directly to the camera. "To the woman who saved my son's life, I am looking for you. Please come forward. The entire city wants to thank you. I want to help you in any way I can. You gave me back my son. Please let me give you something in return." The story exploded across social media. Thousands of people in Portland began searching for the mysterious homeless woman. Churches organized search parties. Shelter volunteers reviewed their security footage. People posted on neighborhood forums, asking if anyone recognized the woman from the video. But Grace Mitchell had no idea any of this was happening. She was sitting in the Morrison Bridge Community Center, a place that offered free breakfast and showers to people living on the streets. Her hands were wrapped in donated bandages. Her arms hurt from the burns, but she had refused to go to a hospital. Hospitals meant paperwork and questions and attention she could not afford. A young volunteer named Rachel Cooper brought her a plate of eggs and toast. "You need to eat something. You look exhausted." Grace nodded her thanks but barely touched the food. She kept thinking about the little boy, wondering if he was okay, hoping the paramedics had gotten to him in time. She had seen terrible things during her years on the streets, but she had never felt as terrified as she had in that burning building. And she had never felt as alive. "Grace, you should really get those burns looked at properly," Rachel said, sitting down across from her. "They could get infected." "I will be fine," Grace said quietly. She always said that, even when it was not true. Rachel studied her with concern. She was in her late 20s, bright and earnest, and she treated everyone at the center with genuine kindness. "You're one of the strongest people I know. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." Grace managed a small smile. "I'm just trying to make it through another day." "You do more than that," Rachel insisted. "You help the other folks here. You share what you have, even when you have almost nothing. You're a good person, Grace." If only Rachel knew what she had done last night. But Grace said nothing. She finished her meal, thanked Rachel, and prepared to leave. She needed to find a safe place to sleep for the day. The nights were getting colder, and her usual spot under the bridge was too exposed. As she walked out of the community center, she passed a television in the common area. A news program was showing footage of a fire. Grace froze, recognizing the building. Then she saw herself on the screen, a grainy image of her running into the building, then emerging with the child. Her blood turned cold. "Can you believe that?" someone said nearby. "A homeless lady saved some rich guy's kid. The dad is offering like $50,000 to find her." $50,000. Can you imagine? Grace backed away from the television, her heart racing. She could not handle this. She could not handle the attention, the questions, the way people would look at her. She did not want to be a hero. She just wanted to survive. She hurried out of the building and into the gray Portland morning, not knowing that inside, Rachel Cooper had glanced at the television screen, then at the woman walking away, and had suddenly realized something remarkable. Rachel pulled out her phone with shaking hands and searched for the news article. She looked at the grainy video, then back at the doorway where Grace had just disappeared. The resemblance was unmistakable. The jacket, the build, the way she moved. Rachel had just served breakfast to the woman the entire city was searching for, and she had to decide what to do about it. Thomas Bennett had barely slept in 3 days. Oliver was recovering well, but Thomas could not rest until he found the woman who had saved his son. He had given dozens of interviews, appeared on morning shows, and even hired a private investigator. The reward had climbed to $75,000. Tips were flooding in from across the city, but so far none had led to the mysterious rescuer. Caroline, his sister, felt terrible about the whole situation. She had been at her therapy practice when the fire started, and she blamed herself for not being there to protect Oliver. Now she sat in Thomas's office at Bennett Technologies, a successful software company Thomas had built from nothing, and watched her brother pace like a caged animal. "You need to sleep," Caroline said gently. "Oliver needs you healthy." "I need to find her," Thomas replied, running his hands through his dark hair. This woman had nothing. She was homeless. And she ran into a burning building for a child she didn't even know. "How do I live with myself if I don't find a way to help her?" Caroline understood. Her brother had always been generous, always looking for ways to give back to the community. After Jennifer died, he had donated millions to cancer research. He funded scholarships for low-income students. He volunteered at food banks. Helping others was how Thomas processed his grief and found meaning in loss. "The whole city is looking for her," Caroline reminded him. "Every shelter, every church, every outreach program. Someone will recognize her eventually." But as the days passed, the mysterious woman remained elusive. Some people began to question if she even existed, if maybe the video was staged or misunderstood. Thomas refused to believe that. He had watched the footage 1,000 times. That woman was real, and she had saved Oliver's life. Rachel Cooper sat in her small apartment that evening, staring at her phone. She had Grace Mitchell's photo pulled up next to the viral video, comparing them side by side. It was definitely the same person. The same build, the same jacket, the same gentle way of moving. Rachel had seen Grace at the community center for over a year now. She knew Grace was private, quiet, and always reluctant to accept help. She knew Grace carried deep pain beneath her calm exterior. And now Rachel had to decide whether to honor Grace's obvious desire for privacy or to help her receive the recognition and assistance she clearly needed and deserved. Rachel thought about the $75,000 reward. That money could transform Grace's life. It could get her off the streets, into housing, into treatment for her injuries. It could give her a chance to rebuild. And the man offering the reward seemed genuinely desperate to help, not exploit. But Rachel also knew that Grace had walked away from the scene for a reason. She had not stayed to be thanked or rewarded. She had not wanted attention. Forcing her into the spotlight felt like a betrayal of trust. Rachel made a decision. She would talk to Grace first, tell her what was happening, and let Grace decide for herself. If Grace wanted to remain anonymous, Rachel would respect that. But Grace deserved to know that the entire city was looking for her, and that real help was being offered. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the community center early. She set up the breakfast station and waited, hoping Grace would come in. Grace often showed up for the morning meal, though she sometimes skipped days when she felt too anxious or unwell. Hours passed. Rachel served dozens of people, chatted with regulars, and kept glancing at the door. By 10 in the morning, she was beginning to worry. What if Grace had moved to a different part of the city? What if her injuries had gotten worse? What if she was avoiding the center because she knew people might recognize her? Then, just before 11, Grace walked through the door. She looked exhausted, her bandaged hands held carefully at her sides, her eyes darting around the room as if checking for threats. She saw Rachel and offered a small nod of greeting. Rachel's heart pounded. She served Grace a plate of food and then asked, "Can we talk privately for a minute? It's important." Grace's expression became guarded. "Is something wrong?" "No," Rachel said quickly. "Nothing wrong. I need to tell you something. Please." They moved to a quiet corner of the center, away from the other guests. Rachel took a breath and said, "Grace, I know what you did. I saw the video. I know you're the woman who saved that little boy from the fire." Grace's face went pale. For a moment Rachel thought she might bolt. But then Grace simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Please don't tell anyone." "Grace, listen to me," Rachel said urgently. "The child's father is looking for you. Is offering $75,000 just for information about where you are. He wants to help you. He wants to thank you. He's not trying to hurt you or expose you. He just wants to give back to the person who saved his son's life." Grace shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. I can't do that. I can't be on television or in the news. I just want to be left alone. But why? Rachel asked gently. Grace, that money could change your life. You could get an apartment, get medical care, start over. You saved a child's life. Why won't you let someone help you now? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, because I don't deserve it. I couldn't save my own family. I failed them. I don't deserve to be called a hero when I couldn't save the people I loved most. Rachel felt her heart break. She had suspected Grace was running from a painful past, but she had not known the details. Grace, whatever happened before, it wasn't your fault. And saving that little boy matters. His father deserves the chance to thank you. Please, at least meet with him. Just once. If you don't want the money or the attention after that, I'll respect your decision. But give him the chance to say thank you to the woman who gave him back his son. Grace looked at her bandaged hands. She thought about the little boy's face, his arms reaching for her through the smoke. She thought about how it felt to matter again, even for just a few minutes. And she thought about how tired she was of running from her past. Okay, she whispered. I'll meet him. Once. But that's all. Rachel felt relief wash over her. She pulled out her phone and said, let me make a call. I promise, Grace. This is going to be a good thing. 20 minutes later, Rachel was on the phone with Thomas Bennett's assistant, explaining that she had information about the woman from the fire. Within an hour, Thomas himself called Rachel back, his voice shaking with emotion. You found her? Are you certain? I'm certain, Rachel said. Her name is Grace Mitchell. She's been coming to our community center for over a year. She's a good person, Mr. Bennett. She's private and she's scared, but she agreed to meet with you. When? Thomas asked immediately. Where? I'll come right now. Rachel looked over at Grace, who was sitting with her head down, looking small and frightened. Give us 1 hour. Come to the Morrison Bridge Community Center. And Mr. Bennett? Please be gentle with her. She's been through more than you know. I understand, Thomas said, his voice thick. Thank you. Thank you so much. When Rachel hung up, she returned to Grace and sat down beside her. He's coming. In 1 hour. Are you okay? Grace nodded slowly, though her hands were shaking. What do I say to him? Just be yourself, Rachel said. That's all you need to be. Outside, news of the meeting was already beginning to spread. Thomas had immediately called Caroline, who called her closest friends. Word traveled through Portland's tight-knit community circles. By the time Thomas arrived at the center, a small crowd of volunteers and supporters had gathered outside, holding signs that read "Thank you, Hero" and "Portland loves you." But inside, Grace Mitchell sat alone at a corner table, her heart pounding, waiting to meet the man whose son she had saved, and having no idea that this meeting would be the beginning of something she never could have imagined. Thomas Bennett had been in high-pressure situations his entire career. He had pitched to venture capitalists, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and stood before thousands of employees to announce company changes. But walking into the Morrison Bridge Community Center to meet the woman who had saved his son's life was the most nerve-wracking moment of his life. He had brought flowers, a large bouquet of bright red roses and white lilies, and he carried them awkwardly as Rachel Cooper met him at the entrance. She looked young but capable, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming, Rachel said, shaking his hand. Grace is waiting inside. Before you meet her, I need you to understand something. She's very fragile right now. She's been through trauma that I can't fully explain. Please be patient with her. Thomas nodded, his throat tight. I just want to thank her. That's all. Rachel led him through the community center. It was a simple space with worn furniture and scuffed floors, but it was clean and warm. Several people looked up as Thomas passed, their expressions curious. He was dressed in a dark blue suit, and he clearly did not belong in this environment, but nobody said anything. Then he saw her. Grace Mitchell sat at a table near the back window, her hands wrapped in bandages, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore faded jeans and a green sweater that looked too big for her thin frame. When she looked up and saw him approaching, Her blue eyes went wide with something that looked like fear. Thomas's first thought was that she looked too small to have done what she did. Too tired. Too fragile. His second thought was that she had the saddest eyes he had ever seen. He approached slowly and stopped a few feet from the table. Grace Mitchell. She nodded, not speaking. Thomas felt his eyes fill with tears. He had promised himself he would stay composed, but seeing the woman who had run into a burning building to save Oliver shattered every wall he had built. He set the flowers on the table and then, without thinking, he dropped to his knees beside her chair. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for giving him back to me." Grace stared at him in shock. This powerful, wealthy man was kneeling on the floor of a homeless shelter, crying in front of her. She did not know what to do. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I'm sorry," Thomas said, wiping his eyes and trying to pull himself together. He stood up and sat in the chair across from her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I've been looking for you for days. I needed to see you. I needed to tell you that what you did, running into that fire, you saved the most important person in my life. Oliver is everything to me. Is all I have left. And you brought him back to me." Grace finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Is he okay? The little boy?" "He's perfect," Thomas said, his face breaking into a smile despite his tears. "He's home now. He keeps asking about the nice lady who helped him. He wants to meet you, if you're willing." Grace felt her own eyes filling with tears. The boy was okay. She had saved him. It had been worth it. "I'm so glad," she said softly. "I was so worried." Thomas leaned forward. "Grace, I want to help you. I want to give you the reward money. It's $75,000 now. But more than that, I want to help you get off the streets, get medical care for your injuries, help you rebuild your life. You gave me everything when you saved Oliver. Please let me give you something back." Grace looked down at her bandaged hands. Part of her wanted to refuse, to tell him she did not need charity, to protect what little dignity she had left. But another part of her, the part that had been sleeping on cold concrete and eating from dumpsters and slowly losing hope, that part whispered that maybe it was okay to accept help. Maybe it was okay to stop fighting alone. "Why would you do that for me?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me." "Because you did something for me without knowing me," Thomas said. "You didn't ask who Oliver was or whether I could pay you back. You just saw a child in danger, and you acted. That's the kind of person you are. And people like you deserve every good thing this world can offer." Grace felt something crack open inside her chest. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her like she mattered, like she had value beyond being a problem to be solved or ignored. She looked at Thomas Bennett, this stranger with tears on his face and hope in his eyes, and she made a decision that terrified her. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll accept your help." Thomas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me." Rachel appeared beside them with tissues and 2 cups of coffee. She was crying too, overcome by the emotion in the room. "I'm sorry," she said, laughing through her tears. "This is just so beautiful." Over the next hour, Thomas and Grace talked. He told her about Oliver, about losing his wife Jennifer to cancer, about how hard it had been to raise a son alone while running a company. Grace listened, and slowly, she began to open up too. She told him about the fire that had taken her husband and daughter 5 years ago, about how the guilt and grief had slowly destroyed her, about how she had lost her job and her home and eventually her will to keep fighting. "I've been invisible for so long," Grace said, her voice shaking. "I forgot what it felt like to be seen as a person. When I heard your son crying in that building, something in me woke up. I couldn't let another child die in a fire. I couldn't fail again." Thomas reached across the table and gently placed his hand near hers, not quite touching, giving her space. "You didn't fail, Grace. You saved him. And now I'm going to help you save yourself." True to his word, Thomas immediately began making arrangements. He called his assistant and instructed her to book Grace a room at a nice hotel for the next week while they found her a proper apartment. He scheduled appointments with doctors to treat her burns and check her overall health. He connected her with a social worker who specialized in helping people transition out of homelessness. But most importantly, he treated her with dignity and respect. He asked her opinion on everything. He listened when she spoke. He made her feel like a partner in the process, not a charity case. Caroline arrived later that afternoon, having heard from Thomas that he had found Grace. She brought Oliver with her, and when the little boy saw Grace, his face lit up with recognition. "Angel lady," Oliver said, running to her. Grace knelt down despite the pain in her legs, and Oliver hugged her tightly. She held him close, breathing in the scent of his baby shampoo, feeling his small arms around her neck, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt a sense of peace. She had not been able to save her daughter, but she had saved this child. And maybe that meant something. Maybe that meant she still had a purpose. "Thank you for saving me," Oliver said seriously, his blue eyes, so much like his father's, looking into his. "You're very brave." Grace smiled through her tears. "You're very brave too." As the afternoon turned to evening, the community center began to fill with people who had heard the news. Volunteers brought food. Local business owners dropped off gift cards and supplies. A woman from a nearby church brought clothes in Grace's size. A dentist offered free dental work. A hairstylist offered a free haircut and color. The outpouring of kindness was overwhelming. Have you ever witnessed a community come together to help someone in need? How does it make you feel to see strangers offering kindness without expecting anything in return? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to see how Grace's incredible journey continues. But through it all, Thomas stayed by Grace's side, making sure she was not overwhelmed, making sure she felt safe and protected. And Grace, for the first time in years, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life was not over. Maybe it was just beginning again. The hotel room felt like a dream. Grace stood in the center of the spacious room at the Riverside Hotel in downtown Portland, unable to believe this was real. The bed was enormous, covered in crisp white sheets and soft pillows. The bathroom had hot water that worked, towels that were clean and thick, and soap that smelled like lavender. Through the large windows, she could see the Willamette River reflecting the city lights. Thomas had checked her in himself, making sure the staff treated her with respect and kindness. He had also left several shopping bags on the bed, new clothes in her size, toiletries, a warm coat, and even a new pair of shoes. A note was attached to one of the bags in neat handwriting. "These are just temporary until we can take you shopping properly. Please rest tonight. You've earned it. Thomas." Grace sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not sad tears this time, but tears of relief and disbelief. After 3 years of sleeping on concrete, of being cold and hungry and afraid, she was in a clean room with a locked door and a soft bed. She was safe. She took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away years of doubt and shame. She treated her burns carefully with the ointment the hotel doctor had provided during his evening visit. Then she put on the new pajamas Thomas had bought, soft blue cotton that felt like a hug, and climbed into bed. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Grace slept through the entire night without waking once. The next morning, Thomas arrived with Caroline and Oliver. They brought breakfast from a nearby cafe, fresh pastries, fruit, orange juice, and coffee. Grace felt awkward at first, not used to being treated like a guest, but the Bennett family made her feel welcome and comfortable. "How did you sleep?" Caroline asked warmly. She was in her late 30s with kind eyes and an easy smile. She wore a maroon sweater and jeans, looking professional but approachable. "Better than I have in years," Grace admitted. "Thank you. Thank you all so much." Oliver climbed onto the couch next to Grace and showed her his toy truck. "This is Lightning. He's very fast. Do you like trucks?" Grace smiled, her heart warming at the child's innocent question. "I do now." Thomas pulled out a folder and sat across from Grace. "I hope you don't mind, but I've been making some plans. I want to run everything by you first. This is your life, and you get to make all the decisions. I'm just here to help make things easier." Over the next hour, Thomas laid out a comprehensive plan. First, they would get Grace all the identification documents she needed, a new driver's license, social security card, birth certificate copies. His lawyer was already working on expediting the process. Second, they would find her a furnished apartment where she could live while she figured out her next steps. He had already identified several options in safe neighborhoods with good public transportation. Third, they would address her medical needs. He had scheduled appointments with a primary care doctor, a therapist who specialized in trauma, and a specialist for her burns. "I don't expect you to make any big decisions right away," Thomas said gently. "Take your time. Heal. Get your strength back. But when you're ready, I'd like to help you explore job training or education, whatever interests you. You have a future ahead of you, Grace. A good one." Grace listened to all of this with a mixture of gratitude and fear. It was so much. It was everything. And part of her kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell her it was all a mistake, that she did not really deserve any of this. Caroline, who was trained to recognize trauma responses, seemed to sense Grace's anxiety. She moved to sit beside her and said softly, "I know this is overwhelming. I know it feels too good to be true. But Grace, you saved a child's life. You risked everything for a stranger. You deserve every bit of help we can give you. Please don't talk yourself out of accepting it." Grace nodded, trying to push down the voice in her head that told her she was not worthy. "I'm just not used to people being this kind." "Then get used to it," Caroline said with a smile. "Because we're not going anywhere." Over the next 2 weeks, Grace's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Thomas found her a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, a vibrant neighborhood full of art galleries and cafes. The apartment came fully furnished with everything she could need: dishes, linens, furniture, even a television. Local businesses had donated many of the items when they heard Grace's story, wanting to be part of her new beginning. The medical appointments revealed that while Grace had some health issues from malnutrition and exposure to the elements, everything was treatable. Her burns were healing well and would leave only minor scars. The therapist, Dr. Helena Foster, was patient and understanding, never pushing Grace to talk about her trauma before she was ready, but creating a safe space for her to begin processing her grief. Rachel continued to visit regularly, bringing updates from the community center, and making sure Grace knew she always had a friend. The two women would have coffee in Grace's new apartment, and Rachel would share stories about the other folks at the center, keeping Grace connected to the community that had supported her during her darkest days. One afternoon, Thomas arrived with an unexpected guest. A small gray and white cat in a carrier. "Her name is Hope," Thomas said, setting the carrier on Grace's couch. "The shelter said she's about 3 years old and very affectionate. I thought you might like some company." Grace opened the carrier, and the cat immediately walked out and rubbed against her legs, purring loudly. Grace picked her up and felt tears spring to her eyes. She had not held a pet since losing her own cat in the fire 5 years ago. Hope settled into her arms like she belonged there. "She's perfect," Grace whispered. Oliver, who had come along with his father, was delighted. "Can I pet her? Please." Grace sat on the couch with Oliver beside her, and they gently stroked Hope's soft fur. Thomas watched them with a warm feeling in his chest. Over the past 2 weeks, he had spent nearly every day with Grace, helping her navigate her new life, and he found himself looking forward to their time together. There was something about her quiet strength and gentle spirit that drew him in. She had been through so much, yet she remained kind and compassionate. She never complained. She was always grateful, even for small things. And Oliver adored her. The little boy talked about Miss Grace constantly, asked when they could visit her, and insisted on bringing her drawings and small gifts. Caroline had noticed her brother's growing attachment to Grace, and one evening when they were alone, she brought it up. "You really care about her, don't you?" Thomas looked surprised. "Of course I care about her. She saved Oliver's life." "That's not what I mean," Caroline said gently. "I think you're developing feelings for her. Real feelings." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is that wrong? Jennifer's been gone for 2 years. I thought I'd never feel anything for anyone again. But Grace, she makes me want to be a better person. She makes me feel like I'm doing something meaningful. And when I'm with her, I feel at peace." Caroline smiled. "It's not wrong at all. But be careful, Thomas. Grace is in a vulnerable place right now. She's dependent on you for help. Make sure your feelings are genuine, and make sure you're not taking advantage of her situation." "I would never do that," Thomas said firmly. "I just want her to be happy and healthy. If she never sees me as anything more than a friend, that's okay. Her well-being is what matters. But as the weeks continued, it became clear that Grace's feelings for Thomas were growing too. She found herself thinking about him when he was not around, looking forward to his visits, feeling a flutter in her chest when he smiled at her. It both excited and terrified her. She had not felt anything for anyone since losing her husband. She had thought that part of her heart was dead forever. One evening, Thomas invited Grace to dinner at his home. It was the first time she had been to his house, a beautiful craftsman-style home in the hills overlooking Portland. Caroline was there too, along with Oliver, making it feel comfortable and casual rather than like a date. They made dinner together, pasta with homemade sauce, salad, garlic bread. Oliver helped Grace set the table, showing her where everything went with serious concentration. They ate together, talking and laughing, and for a moment Grace felt like she was part of a family again. After dinner, while Caroline put Oliver to bed, Thomas and Grace sat on the back porch with mugs of tea, watching the city lights twinkle below them. "Can I ask you something?" Thomas said quietly. "Of course." "What made you run into that building? You could have died. You could have just called 911 and waited like everyone else. Why did you risk your life?" Grace was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she said, "Because I heard him crying. And it reminded me of my daughter. When our house caught fire 5 years ago, I was at the grocery store. My husband was home with our daughter, Emma. She was only 4 years old. By the time I got home, the fire trucks were there, but it was too late. They couldn't save them." Thomas felt his throat tighten. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I've lived with that guilt every day since," Grace continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I wasn't there. I couldn't save them. I couldn't protect my own child. And that broke me. I lost my job because I couldn't function. I lost our home because I couldn't pay the mortgage. I ended up on the streets because I didn't care enough to fight for myself anymore. But when I heard Oliver crying, something in me just snapped. I couldn't let another child die in a fire. I couldn't fail again." Thomas reached over and gently took her hand. "You didn't fail, Grace. What happened to your family was a terrible tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. And what you did for Oliver, that was the most courageous thing I've ever seen. You gave me back my son. You gave him a future. And now I want to help you see that you have a future too. A good one. One worth living." Grace looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch, and for the first time in 5 years, she let herself believe that maybe he was right. Maybe it was not too late for her. Maybe she could build a new life, a happy life, even after everything she had lost. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for helping me, for making me feel human again." "Thank you for being you," Thomas replied, "for being kind and brave and beautiful, inside and out." They sat together in comfortable silence, both of them thinking about the unexpected journey that had brought them together, and both of them wondering what the future might hold. Grace had been in her new apartment for 6 weeks, and every day felt like a gift. She had gained weight and color had returned to her face. Her hair, cut and styled by a generous local salon, now framed her face in soft layers. The burns on her hands had healed into faint pink scars. She looked healthy. She looked alive. But more importantly, she felt alive. Dr. Helena Foster, her therapist, had been instrumental in helping Grace process her grief and trauma. They met twice a week, and slowly, Grace was learning to separate her identity from her tragedy. She was learning that losing her family did not mean she had lost her right to happiness or purpose. "You've made remarkable progress," Dr. Foster said during one of their sessions. "Have you thought about what you want to do next? Career-wise, I mean." Grace had been thinking about it constantly. Thomas had offered to pay for any education or training she wanted, but Grace had been hesitant to take more from him. She wanted to stand on her own feet, to contribute something meaningful to the world. "I've been thinking about working with children," Grace admitted. "When I held Oliver after the fire, something in me woke up. I used to be a teacher before everything fell apart. Elementary school. I loved it. Maybe I could do something like that again." Dr. Foster smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You have a natural gift with children, and your experiences have given you deep empathy and understanding. You could make a real difference in young lives. That evening, Grace mentioned the idea to Rachel during one of her regular coffee meetings. Rachel's face lit up. Grace, that's perfect. You know, the community center has been trying to start an after-school program for kids whose parents are working late. We don't have the funding for a full-time teacher, but we could use volunteers. It might be a good way for you to ease back into working with children without too much pressure. Grace felt a spark of excitement. I would love that. When can I start? Within a week, Grace was volunteering at the Morrison Bridge Community Center 3 afternoons a week, helping children with homework, organizing activities, and simply being a stable, caring presence in their lives. Many of the children came from unstable homes or were dealing with their own traumas. Grace understood their pain in a way few others could. She was patient and kind, never raising her voice, always finding ways to encourage and support each child. She helped a shy 7-year-old girl learn to read. She taught a group of boys how to build things with recycled materials. She listened to a 10-year-old talk about his fears when his mother was working 2 jobs and rarely home. Thomas came by one afternoon to see how she was doing and found her sitting on the floor with 5 children, all of them building a city out of cardboard boxes. Grace was laughing at something one of the kids said, her face radiant with joy. Thomas stood in the doorway, watching, and felt his heart swell with emotion. This was who Grace was meant to be. This was her purpose. When Grace noticed him watching, she smiled and waved. Come join us. We're building Portland. Thomas sat down on the floor, not caring about his expensive suit, and helped the children construct a miniature bridge. Oliver had come with him, and he immediately joined in, chattering excitedly about where they should put the toy cars. Later, after the children's parents had picked them up, Thomas and Grace walked through the center together. You're incredible with those kids, Thomas said. They love you. I love them too, Grace replied. This is the first time in years that I felt like I'm doing something that matters. Like I have a purpose again. Thomas had an idea forming in his mind, but he wanted to run it by his team at work first. Over the next week, he held several meetings with his company's leadership. Bennett Technologies was successful and profitable, and Thomas had been looking for ways to invest in the community. Several of his employees had young children and struggled to find affordable, quality childcare. Thomas proposed creating an on-site childcare center at Bennett Technologies, staffed by trained professionals who could provide care and early education for employees' children. It would be a company benefit that would help his workers balance their careers and families. And he knew exactly who he wanted to help run the program. But first, Grace needed proper certification. Thomas researched programs and found an accelerated childcare provider certification course offered through Portland Community College. It was a 3-month program that would give Grace the credentials she needed to work professionally with children. He approached her carefully, not wanting to seem pushy. Grace, I have a proposal for you, he said over dinner at his house one evening. Caroline and Oliver were there, as had become their custom. The 4 of them had started having regular dinners together, creating a routine that felt comfortable and family-like. That sounds ominous, Grace said with a small smile. Thomas laughed. It's not, I promise. I want to start a childcare center at my company for employees' kids. And I want you to be part of the team running it. But you'd need certification first. There's a program starting next month at the community college. It's intensive but short. Would you be interested? Grace felt excitement and nervousness battle in her chest. Thomas, you've already done so much for me. I can't ask you to pay for more schooling. You're not asking. I'm offering, Thomas said firmly. And this is as much for me as it is for you. I need someone trustworthy and caring to help run this center. Someone who genuinely loves children and understands how important those early years are. That's you, Grace. Please say yes. Caroline added her encouragement. Grace, you have a gift. I've seen you with Oliver and with the kids at the community center. This is what you're meant to do. Let Thomas help you get the training you need to do it professionally. Grace looked at Oliver, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. Will you come work at Daddy's building? Then I can see you every day. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. How could she say no to that face? And more importantly, why would she? Thomas was offering her not just training, but a career, a purpose, a future. She had spent so long believing she did not deserve good things that she had almost forgotten how to accept them. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll do it. Thank you." The next 3 months were challenging but fulfilling. Grace attended classes 4 days a week, learning about child development, safety protocols, curriculum planning, and classroom management. She studied hard, determined to prove she deserved this opportunity. On the days she was not in class, she continued volunteering at the community center, applying what she was learning. Thomas supported her throughout the process, helping her study, encouraging her when she doubted herself, and celebrating her successes. Caroline became her friend and mentor, offering professional advice from her own experience as a therapist. And Oliver became her little cheerleader, proudly telling everyone that Miss Grace was going to be a teacher. Grace also began attending a support group for people who had experienced traumatic loss. Dr. Foster had recommended it, and while Grace had been nervous at first, she found incredible comfort in connecting with others who understood her pain. She met a young father who had lost his wife in a car accident. She met an elderly woman who had lost her home in a flood. She met a teenage girl who had survived a school shooting. They shared their stories, their grief, their struggles to move forward. And slowly, Grace realized she was not alone. Her pain was not unique, and her survival was not shameful. She was part of a community of people who had faced unimaginable loss and were choosing to keep living anyway. One evening at the support group, Grace shared her full story for the first time: the fire, losing her family, becoming homeless, saving Oliver, and everything that had happened since. When she finished, there were tears throughout the room. An older man named George said, "You know what I hear in your story? I hear redemption. I hear second chances. I hear that even when we think our lives are over, God has other plans for us. You saved that boy, and in doing so, you saved yourself." Grace had never thought about it that way, but George was right. Saving Oliver had been the turning point. It had reminded her that she still had something to offer, that her life still had value and purpose. And it had connected her to people who saw her worth and were determined to help her reclaim it. When Grace completed her certification program, Thomas threw her a small graduation party at his house. Rachel came, bringing several volunteers from the community center. Caroline was there with Oliver. Even some of Grace's classmates attended. There was cake and decorations and heartfelt speeches about how far Grace had come. Thomas presented her with a framed certificate and a job offer letter. "Grace Mitchell, it is my honor to officially offer you the position of lead early childhood educator at Bennett Technologies Child King Center. Your starting salary is $55,000 per year, plus full benefits. Do you accept?" Grace took the letter with shaking hands and read it through tears. $55,000 a year. That was more money than she had made as a teacher before everything fell apart. It was security. It was stability. It was respect. "I accept," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Oliver ran up and hugged her legs. "Yay. Now you can work at Daddy's building." Thomas pulled Grace into a hug, and over her shoulder, Caroline smiled. She had watched her brother fall deeper in love with Grace over the past 3 months, and she had watched Grace slowly open her heart to the possibility of loving again. They were not rushing anything, both of them taking time to build a genuine friendship first. But Caroline could see where this was heading, and she was happy for both of them. That night, after everyone had left, Thomas and Grace sat on his back porch again, looking out over the city. Grace was wearing a bright blue dress that Caroline had helped her pick out for the party, and her hair was pulled back with a silver clip. "I can't believe this is my life now," Grace said softly. 6 months ago, I was sleeping under a bridge. Now I have an apartment, a career, friends. I keep waiting to wake up and find out it's all a dream." "It's not a dream," Thomas said, reaching over to take her hand. "It's your life, the life you deserve. And Grace, I hope you know that you didn't just save Oliver that day. You saved me too. You reminded me that there's still goodness in the world, still people worth believing in. You made me want to be better, to do more, to give back. I'm a better person because I know you." Grace turned to look at him, and in the soft porch light, she saw nothing but sincerity in his eyes. "You gave me back my life. You and Caroline and Oliver, You became my family when I had nothing. I don't know how to thank you for that." "Then don't thank me," Thomas said. "Just be happy. Just keep being the amazing person you are. That's all I want." They sat in comfortable silence, both of them thinking about the journey that had brought them together. A tragedy had connected them, but kindness, hope, and growing love were keeping them together. And both of them were beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, their story was far from over. Maybe it was just beginning. The Childcare Center at Bennett Technologies opened on a bright Monday morning in late spring. The space had been completely renovated. Colorful murals decorated the walls, new playground equipment filled the outdoor area, and 6 classrooms had been equipped with age-appropriate toys, books, and learning materials. Grace had been involved in every aspect of the planning, and seeing her vision come to life filled her with pride and purpose. 15 children enrolled in the first week, ranging from infants to 5-year-olds. Grace worked alongside 2 other certified educators and 3 assistants, creating a warm and nurturing environment where children could learn and grow while their parents worked upstairs. Oliver was enrolled, of course, which meant Grace saw him every day. Thomas would often stop by during his lunch break to check on things, but also just to see Grace. She would be reading to a group of toddlers or helping older children with art projects, always patient and kind, always fully present. Watching her work made Thomas's heart swell. This was where she belonged. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the center opened, Grace was organizing supplies in the storage room when Caroline appeared in the doorway. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course," Grace said, setting down the box of crayons she had been sorting. "Is everything okay?" Caroline stepped inside and closed the door. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to check in with you. You've been doing amazing work here, and I can see how happy you are. But I also know that healing isn't linear. Sometimes when we're doing well, old trauma can resurface. I wanted to make sure you're still taking care of yourself emotionally." Grace appreciated Caroline's concern. They had become close friends over the past months, and Caroline's professional insight as a therapist had been invaluable during Grace's recovery. "I'm still seeing Dr. Foster once a week. And I'm going to the support group twice a month. I'm doing okay, really. Better than okay." "I'm glad," Caroline said warmly. "But there's something else I wanted to talk about. The anniversary of your family's death is coming up next month, isn't it? May 15th. Grace felt her stomach clench. She had been trying not to think about it, but Caroline was right. It would be 6 years on May 15th since the fire that had taken her husband Robert and daughter Emma. 6 years since her life had fallen apart. "I remember," Grace said quietly. "I've been trying to prepare myself, but I don't know how to do that. Every year it just crushes me all over again." Caroline sat down on a small chair meant for children and gestured for Grace to join her. "I think it might be time for you to visit their graves. You've been avoiding it, haven't you?" Grace nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I couldn't face it. When I was homeless, I felt too ashamed to go. Like I had failed them so completely that I didn't deserve to stand at their graves. And since everything changed, I've been scared. Scared that if I go back to that place, I'll fall apart again." "Or maybe," Caroline said gently, "you'll find closure. You're not the same person you were 6 years ago, or even 6 months ago. You've healed. You've grown. You've built a new life. Maybe it's time to say a proper goodbye to your old one." Grace wiped her eyes. "I don't know if I can do it alone." "You don't have to," Caroline said. "I'll go with you. Or Thomas will. Or both of us. Whatever you need." The thought of not facing it alone made it feel slightly less terrifying. "Would you really do that?" "Of course," Caroline said, reaching over to squeeze Grace's hand. "We're family now. That's what family does." 2 weeks later, on a gray Saturday morning, Grace stood at the entrance of Riverview Cemetery with Thomas and Caroline on either side of her. Oliver was spending the day with Thomas's parents, who had flown in from Seattle for a visit, and had been thrilled to meet the woman who had saved their grandson. Grace clutched a bouquet of yellow roses, Emma's favorite flower, and felt her legs trembling. She had not been to this cemetery in over 3 years. The last time she had visited, she had still had a job and an apartment, but she had been barely holding on, drowning in grief and guilt. "Take your time," Thomas said softly. We're here. We're not going anywhere. They walked slowly through the cemetery until they reached two graves side by side under a large oak tree. The headstones were simple but beautiful. Robert James Mitchell, devoted husband and father. Emma Rose Mitchell, beloved daughter and joy of our lives. Grace sank to her knees in front of the graves, and all the emotions she had been holding back came flooding out. She sobbed, her body shaking, 6 years of grief and guilt and longing pouring out of her. Thomas and Caroline knelt beside her, each placing a hand on her shoulders, offering silent support. "I'm so sorry," Grace whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I fell apart after you were gone. I'm sorry for everything." She cried for a long time, while Thomas and Caroline simply held space for her pain. Finally, when the worst of it had passed, Grace took a shaky breath and began to speak to her husband and daughter, telling them everything that had happened over the past 6 years. She told them about becoming homeless, about the darkest nights when she had wanted to give up. She told them about hearing Oliver cry in the fire and finding the courage to act. She told them about Thomas and Caroline and the new life she was building. "I think you sent them to me," Grace said, placing the yellow roses on Emma's grave. "I think you knew I needed help, and you sent people who would see me, who would care. And I promise I'm going to keep living. I'm going to honor your memories by being the best person I can be. I'm going to love again, and work again, and find joy again. Because that's what you would want for me." She looked at Robert's headstone and felt, for the first time, like maybe he would approve of Thomas. Robert had been kind and generous, always putting his family first. He would have wanted Grace to be happy. He would have wanted her to find love again. "I miss you both so much," Grace whispered. "I'll always miss you. But I'm going to be okay now. I promise." Thomas helped Grace to her feet, and the three of them stood together in silence for a few more minutes. Then Caroline said, "Would you like some time alone with them?" Grace shook her head. "No. I think I've said what I needed to say. And I think they know I'm going to be all right." As they walked back to Thomas's car, Grace felt lighter than she had in years. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it no longer felt crushing. She had faced her past, honored her losses, and given herself permission to move forward. And she had done it with people who cared about her by her side. Thomas drove them to a quiet restaurant overlooking the river, and they had lunch together. The conversation was gentle and thoughtful, giving Grace space to process her emotions. Caroline talked about her own experience of losing her parents when she was young, how grief changed over time but never completely went away. "The pain becomes part of who you are," Caroline said. "But it doesn't have to define you. You can carry it while still living a full, happy life. That's what healing looks like." Grace nodded, understanding. She was learning to carry her grief without letting it consume her. She was learning that loving again did not mean forgetting. She was learning that she deserved happiness even after tragedy. That evening, Thomas dropped Caroline at her apartment and then drove Grace home. But instead of just dropping her off, he asked, "Would you like to take a walk along the river? It's a beautiful night." Grace agreed, and they walked slowly along the waterfront path, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. The city was alive around them, joggers, cyclists, families with strollers, everyone enjoying the warm spring evening. "Today was hard," Thomas said after a while. "Thank you for letting me be there with you." "Thank you for coming," Grace replied. "I couldn't have done it alone." "You're stronger than you think," Thomas said. "But you never have to do anything alone anymore. I hope you know that." They stopped at a bench overlooking the river and sat down. Thomas had been thinking about this moment for weeks, carefully considering his words, making sure the timing was right. He turned to Grace and took her hand. "Grace, I need to tell you something. And I want you to know that there's no pressure here. I just need to be honest with you about how I feel." Grace's heart started beating faster. "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you," Thomas said simply. "Maybe I've been falling in love with you since the moment I met you. You're kind, brave, intelligent, and beautiful. You make me want to be a better person. You make Oliver happier than I've seen him since his mother died. And when I imagine my future, you're in it. But I also know you've been through so much, and I don't want to rush you or make you feel pressured. So I'm just telling you how I feel, and you can take all the time you need to figure out how you feel." Grace felt tears spring to her eyes again, but this time they were happy tears. She had known her feelings for Thomas were growing, but she had been afraid to acknowledge them, afraid that she was not ready, afraid that loving someone new meant betraying Robert's memory. But sitting here, looking into Thomas's honest, hopeful eyes, she realized that her heart was ready. She was ready. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said softly. "And that terrifies me. But I think Robert would be happy that I found someone like you. Someone who's kind and generous and who loves all of us so much. Someone who saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. I'm not ready to rush into anything, but I want you to know that my feelings are real." Thomas smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. "Then we'll take it slow. We'll figure it out together. No rush. Just together." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and gently kissed her forehead. It was sweet and respectful and filled with promise. Grace closed her eyes and let herself feel the warmth of his affection, the safety of his presence, the hope of a future she was finally ready to embrace. As they sat together watching the river flow past, both of them felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. The past had been painful, but it had led them here, to this moment, to each other. And for the first time in years, both Grace and Thomas believed that the best was yet to come. Summer arrived in Portland with warm sunshine and blue skies. The Child Care Center at Bennett Technologies was thriving. More families had enrolled their children, and Grace had hired 2 additional staff members to keep up with demand. The center had become known throughout the company as not just a convenient service, but a genuinely special place where children were nurtured and loved. Grace arrived early each morning, her heart full of purpose. She had moved beyond just doing her job. She was creating a community. She organized parent workshops on child development, hosted family picnics on weekends, and created a lending library where families could borrow books and toys. Every child who walked through the door received individual attention and care, and parents noticed the difference it made. Thomas watched Grace's success with pride and deepening love. They had been dating for 3 months now, taking things slowly as promised. They had dinner together twice a week, sometimes just the 2 of them, sometimes with Caroline and Oliver. They held hands during walks. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They were building something real and lasting, founded on friendship and mutual respect. One evening over dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant in Northwest Portland, Grace brought up an idea that had been growing in her mind for weeks. "Thomas, I want to start a foundation. Something to help homeless individuals get back on their feet. I keep thinking about all the people I met on the streets, people with stories and struggles just like mine. They need more than shelters and soup kitchens. They need pathways to real stability." Thomas put down his fork, his eyes lighting up with interest. "Tell me more. What would this foundation do?" Grace had clearly thought this through. It would provide short-term housing while people get identification documents and medical care. It would connect them with job training programs and help them find employment. It would offer counseling and support groups. Basically, everything that you did for me, but systematized so we can help dozens of people at a time. "I love it," Thomas said immediately. "And I want to help fund it. What would you call it?" Grace smiled. "I was thinking Second Chances Foundation. Because everyone deserves a second chance at life, no matter what they've been through." Within 2 weeks, Thomas's lawyers had filed the paperwork to establish Second Chances Foundation as a non-profit organization. Thomas provided initial funding of $500,000 and agreed to serve on the board of directors. Caroline joined the board as well, offering to provide free counseling services. Rachel was thrilled to help connect the foundation with the homeless community and agreed to serve as outreach coordinator. Grace worked tirelessly to develop the program structure. She wanted it to be comprehensive but also personal, treating each person as an individual with unique needs and circumstances. The foundation would provide furnished studio apartments for up to 6 months while participants worked on getting stable. During that time, they would receive help with identification documents, medical and dental care, mental health counseling, job training, and employment placement. But Grace insisted on one more element that set Second Chances apart from other programs. Every person who completes the program and gets back on their feet has to commit to volunteering with the foundation for at least 6 months afterward, she explained at a board meeting. Not because we need free labor, but because helping others is part of healing yourself. I know that from experience. When you've been at the bottom and someone lifts you up, passing that forward gives you purpose and pride. The board unanimously approved her vision. The foundation launched in August, and Grace personally interviewed every applicant. The first person she accepted into the program was a single mother named Jennifer Hayes, who was living in her car with her 2 young children after fleeing an abusive relationship. Jennifer was 31 years old, had been a nurse before her life fell apart, and desperately wanted to get back on her feet for her kids. Grace met Jennifer at the community center, and the moment she saw the exhaustion and determination in the young mother's eyes, she knew she was looking at a younger version of herself. Jennifer's daughter was 5 and her son was 3, the same age Emma had been when Grace lost her. "Tell me your story," Grace said gently, sitting across from Jennifer at a corner table. Jennifer's voice shook as she explained how her husband had become increasingly violent, how she had finally found the courage to leave, how she had been sleeping in her car for 2 months because she had no family nearby and no savings. "I just want my kids to be safe and have a normal life," Jennifer said through tears. "I want to work again. I want to provide for them. I just need someone to give me a chance." Grace reached across the table and took Jennifer's hand. "I'm giving you that chance right now. We have an apartment ready for you and your children. It's furnished and stocked with everything you need. Tomorrow, we'll start working on getting you new identification documents since you had to leave yours behind. We'll connect you with a family lawyer who can help you with custody and protection orders. And we'll help you get recertified as a nurse so you can go back to work. You're not alone anymore, Jennifer. We're going to help you build a new life." Jennifer broke down crying, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. Grace held her hand and let her cry, understanding exactly how she felt. 6 months ago, Grace had been in a similar position, afraid to hope but desperate for help. Now she had the privilege of being on the other side, of being the one who offered the second chance. Jennifer and her children moved into one of the foundation's apartments the next day. Grace helped them settle in, making sure the kitchen was stocked with food, that the children had toys and books, that Jennifer had everything she needed to feel safe and secure. The kids, Sophia and Michael, were shy at first, but they warmed up quickly when Grace sat on the floor and played blocks with them. "Miss Grace is nice," Michael said seriously, his big brown eyes studying her. "She is," Jennifer agreed, watching Grace interact with her children with such natural warmth. "Miss Grace is an angel." Over the next few weeks, Grace worked closely with Jennifer, helping her navigate the complex process of rebuilding her life. They went to the DMV together to get Jennifer's license renewed. They met with a lawyer who helped Jennifer file for divorce and get a restraining order against her ex-husband. They connected with a nursing recertification program that would allow Jennifer to refresh her skills and return to work. Thomas provided additional support by connecting Jennifer with a job opportunity at a hospital where Bennett Technologies had corporate partnerships. The hospital was willing to work with Jennifer's schedule and wait for her to complete her recertification before starting. "I don't know how to thank you all," Jennifer said during a meeting with Grace, Thomas, and Caroline. "You've given me and my kids a future. How do I ever repay this?" "You don't have to repay it," Grace said firmly. "You just have to keep moving forward and then help someone else when you're ready. That's how we create change, one person helping another, creating a chain of kindness that keeps going." As Jennifer's story of recovery spread, more people reached out to Second Chances Foundation. A middle-aged man named Daniel who had lost his job and then his home due to medical bills. A young woman named Amy who had aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. A veteran named Marcus who struggled with PTSD and could not hold down employment. Each person had a different story, but they all had one thing in common. They needed someone to believe in them and give them the tools to succeed. Grace accepted 5 more families into the program by the end of September. The foundation's apartments were at full capacity, and Grace was working harder than she ever had in her life. She still ran the child care center during the day, but she spent her evenings and weekends working with Second Chances participants, helping them navigate their journeys back to stability. Thomas worried she was taking on too much, but Grace insisted she had never been happier. "This is what I was meant to do," she told him one evening as they sat on his porch. "I spent 3 years feeling worthless and invisible. Now I get to help people remember their worth and be seen again. It's healing me as much as it's healing them." Thomas pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "You're amazing. You know that, right? You've taken your pain and turned it into purpose. You've created something beautiful out of something terrible. I'm in awe of you." Grace looked up at him, her heart full of love. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You gave me the chance to become who I was always meant to be." "We gave each other second chances," Thomas said softly. "You gave me back my son and reminded me how to hope again. I just helped you remember who you already were." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Caroline had taken Oliver to a movie, giving Thomas and Grace a rare evening alone. It felt peaceful and right, sitting here together, their lives intertwined in ways neither of them could have imagined a year ago. "I have something to tell you," Grace said after a while. "Jennifer started her new job at the hospital last week. She's doing great. And yesterday, she came to me and said she wants to start volunteering at the shelter on her days off, serving meals and talking to other women who are struggling. She's already paying it forward, Thomas. The cycle is working exactly like I hoped it would." Thomas smiled. "That's incredible. How many people has the foundation helped now?" 6 families so far, 14 people total," Grace said proudly. "And we have a waiting list of 20 more. I'm going to need to expand the program soon. Maybe find more apartments, hire more staff." "Whatever you need," Thomas said. "I'll make sure the funding is there. This foundation is changing lives, Grace. It's going to be your legacy." Grace thought about that word, legacy. A year ago, she had thought her legacy would be dying alone on the streets, forgotten and unmourned. Now she was building something that would outlive her, something that would help people for years to come. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. One Saturday afternoon, the foundation held its first graduation ceremony for participants who had completed the program and secured stable housing and employment. Jennifer was among the graduates, along with Daniel, who had found a job as an accountant, and Amy, who had enrolled in community college to study social work. The ceremony was held at the community center, the same place where Grace had once sat as a guest, broken and hopeless. Now she stood at the front of the room as the founder of Second Chances, welcoming a crowd of supporters, donors, volunteers, and graduates. "A year ago, I was homeless," Grace began, her voice steady and clay. "I had lost everything, my family, my home, my sense of self. I felt invisible. I felt worthless. I felt like my life was over. And then something happened that changed everything. I heard a child crying in a burning building, and something inside me woke up. I remembered that I still had something to give. I still mattered. And because I acted in that moment, I met people who saw my worth and helped me rebuild my life." She gestured to Thomas, Caroline, and Rachel, who sat in the front row. "These people gave me a second chance. They believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And now, through this foundation, we're giving others that same gift. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be helped. That's what Second Chances Foundation is all about, creating a community where no one has to struggle alone." The room erupted in applause. Grace presented each graduate with a certificate and a small gift, a journal where they could write their goals and dreams for the future. Jennifer hugged Grace tightly when she received hers, whispering, "Thank you for saving my life." "You saved your own life," Grace whispered back. "I just walked beside you." After the ceremony, there was a reception with food and music. Children ran around playing, including Oliver, who had become friends with Jennifer's kids. Adults talked and laughed, sharing stories and celebrating how far they had come. Thomas watched Grace move through the crowd, stopping to talk with each person, offering encouragement and support, and he felt his heart swell with love and pride. Caroline appeared beside him. "You're going to marry her, aren't you?" Thomas smiled. "I hope so. If she'll have me." "She will," Caroline said confidently. "I've never seen two people more perfect for each other. You both know loss. You both know how to hope. and you both want to make the world better. That's a solid foundation for a marriage. Thomas had been thinking about proposing for weeks, but he wanted to wait for the right moment. He wanted to make sure Grace was ready, that she felt secure in their relationship, that she knew he was committed for the long term. He did not want her to ever feel like his help came with strings attached or that she owed him anything. But as he watched her laugh with the Second Chances graduates, surrounded by the community she had built, Thomas knew that when the time was right, he would ask her to spend the rest of her life with him. And he believed with all his heart that she would say yes. Because they had found each other in the darkest moments of their lives, and together they had built something beautiful. They had taken their pain and turned it into purpose. They had taken their losses and created new love. And they had proven that second chances were not just possible, they were powerful enough to change the world. Fall arrived in Portland with golden leaves and crisp air. Grace had been working with Second Chances Foundation for 4 months, and the program had grown beyond her wildest expectations. They now had 12 apartments housing 23 people, including 8 children. The success rate was remarkable. Every single person who had completed the program was still employed and housed 6 months later. Grace's story had attracted media attention, and she had been featured in several local news segments and a national magazine article titled, "From Homeless to Hero, One Woman's Journey of Redemption." The publicity had brought in additional donations and volunteer support, allowing the foundation to expand even further. But despite all the success and recognition, what Grace treasured most was the small, quiet moments with the people she had come to love. Sunday dinners at Thomas's house had become a cherished tradition. Grace would arrive with fresh flowers or dessert she had baked, and she would help prepare the meal while Oliver told her about his week at school. Caroline often joined them, and the 4 of them had settled into an easy rhythm that felt natural and right. One Sunday in late October, after they had finished eating and Oliver was playing in his room, Thomas asked Grace and Caroline to stay at the table. He had something important to discuss. "I've been thinking about this for a while," Thomas began, looking nervous. "Grace, you and I have been together for 7 months now. And I know we said we would take things slow, but I think we've built something real. Something lasting. Caroline, you've become Grace's best friend and closest confidant. Oliver adores Grace and talks about her constantly. We've become a family, the 4 of us. And I want to make it official." Grace's heart started racing. Was he about to propose? She felt both excited and terrified. She loved Thomas deeply, but marriage felt like such a huge step. Was she ready? But Thomas pulled out a folder instead of a ring box. "Grace, I want to buy a new house. A bigger house where all of us can live together comfortably. A place with enough room for Oliver to grow, for you to have a home office for your foundation work, for Caroline to visit whenever she wants. I want us to build a life together, intentionally and thoughtfully. And before I do that, I want to make sure you're ready for that level of commitment." Grace felt relief wash over her, followed by joy. This was perfect. Thomas was not rushing her into marriage, but he was showing her that he was serious about their future together. He was giving her a chance to build a home with him and Oliver gradually, naturally. "I would love that," Grace said, her eyes filling with happy tears. "I want to build a life with you and Oliver. I'm ready for that." Caroline was beaming. "This is wonderful. I'm so happy for you both." Over the next few weeks, Thomas and Grace went house hunting together. They looked at properties in family-friendly neighborhoods with good schools and parks nearby. Oliver came along to some of the viewings, giving his opinions on which houses had the best backyards for playing. They finally found the perfect place in the Eastmoreland neighborhood, a beautiful craftsman-style house with 4 bedrooms, a large backyard with mature trees, and a separate office space that Grace could use for foundation work. The kitchen was bright and spacious, perfect for family meals. There was a playroom for Oliver and a guest room for Caroline when she stayed over. "This is it," Grace said, standing in the living room and imagining their life here. "This is home." Thomas agreed, and they made an offer that was accepted within days. Grace insisted on contributing to the down payment using money she had saved from her salary at the Child King Center. She wanted this to feel like their home, not just Thomas's house where she lived. Thomas understood and respected her need to contribute. They moved in together in early November, carefully blending their belongings and creating spaces that reflected both of their personalities. Grace brought her furniture from her apartment, including the small table where she had written her first grant proposals for second chances. Thomas brought family photos and Oliver's toys. Together, they picked out new artwork and decorations that made the house feel warm and welcoming. Oliver was thrilled to have Grace living with them full-time. She tucked him in at night, read him bedtime stories, and was there when he woke up in the morning. Grace found herself slipping naturally into a maternal role, and while it brought up painful memories of Emma, it also brought healing. She could honor her daughter's memory while loving Oliver. The two things did not have to be in conflict. Caroline visited often, and one evening she pulled Grace aside for a private conversation. "I need to tell you something. I've been watching you and Thomas together, and I can see how much you love each other. But I also see something else. I see you holding back sometimes, like you're afraid to fully let yourself be happy. Are you worried about something?" Grace sighed and sat down on the couch. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm terrified that this is all going to disappear. That I'll lose Thomas and Oliver the way I lost Robert and Emma. That happiness is temporary and tragedy is just waiting around the corner. I know it's not rational, but the fear is real." Caroline sat beside her and took her hand. "That's completely normal after what you've been through. Trauma teaches us that good things don't last, that loss is inevitable. But Grace, you can't live your whole life waiting for disaster. You have to choose to trust that this happiness is real and lasting. And even if something terrible did happen, which it probably won't, wouldn't you rather have loved fully than held back out of fear?" Grace knew Caroline was right. She had been protecting herself by not fully committing emotionally, by keeping one foot out the door, just in case. But that was no way to live, and it was not fair to Thomas or Oliver, who had both given her their whole hearts. "You're right," Grace said. "I need to let go of the fear, and just be present in this beautiful life I have. I need to trust that I deserve this happiness." "You do deserve it," Caroline said firmly. "And you know what else? Robert and Emma would want you to be happy. They would want you to love again and be loved. Honoring their memory doesn't mean punishing yourself forever." That night, Grace climbed into bed beside Thomas and snuggled close to him. "I love you," she said simply. "Completely. Without reservation. I'm all in." Thomas pulled her closer and kissed her forehead. "I love you too. And I'm so glad you're here." The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were busy and joyful. Grace and Thomas hosted a large Thanksgiving dinner, inviting Caroline, Thomas's parents, Rachel, and several families from Second Chances Foundation. Jennifer came with her children, as did Daniel and Amy and 3 other graduates who had nowhere else to go for the holiday. The house was full of laughter, food, and warmth. Grace looked around the crowded table at all these people who had become her family, some by blood, some by choice, some by circumstances that had brought them together in unexpected ways, and she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. When it was time to go around the table and share what everyone was thankful for, Grace waited until last. Then she said, "I'm thankful for second chances. I'm thankful that even when we lose everything, we can rebuild. I'm thankful for people who see us when we're invisible and help us find our way back to the light. I'm thankful for everyone at this table, for the community we've built together, and for the love that holds us all together. A year ago, I had nothing. Today, I have everything that matters." There was not a dry eye at the table. Thomas reached over and squeezed her hand. Oliver climbed into her lap for a hug. Caroline raised her glass in a toast. And everyone echoed, "To second chances." After dinner, while the adults cleaned up and the children played in the backyard, Thomas pulled Grace into his home office. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. Grace's heart skipped a beat. Was this the proposal she had been both hoping for and nervous about? But Thomas pulled out a small box that was clearly not a ring box. Inside was a key on a silver keychain engraved with the words "Second Chances Main Office." "What's this?" Grace asked, confused. Thomas smiled. "I bought a building. Well, the foundation bought a building with the help of a major donor, who happens to be me. It's downtown, 3 stories, with office space, meeting rooms, and 6 additional apartments for the program. I wanted to give you the key personally. This is your foundation, Grace. You built it from nothing, and now it has a permanent home." Grace stared at the key, then at Thomas, then back at the key. You bought a building for second chances. I bought it for you, Thomas corrected. Because you're changing lives, and you deserve the resources to do it on a larger scale. The building is fully paid for. The foundation owns it outright. You can expand the program, hire more staff, help more people. This is just the beginning of what you can accomplish. Grace threw her arms around Thomas's neck and burst into tears. How did I get so lucky? How did I end up with someone so generous and supportive and wonderful? I'm the lucky one, Thomas said, holding her close. You saved my son and then you saved me. Helping you is the greatest privilege of my life. They stood there holding each other, both of them thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, Grace had been sleeping under a bridge, hopeless and alone. Now she was standing in her own home, surrounded by family, running a successful foundation, and deeply in love with a man who believed in her completely. I'm ready, Grace whispered. Ready for what? Thomas asked. Ready for everything, Grace said, pulling back to look into his eyes. Ready to build a future with you. Ready to be Oliver's mom, if he'll have me. Ready to stop being afraid and just live fully. I'm ready, Thomas. Thomas smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. Good. Because I have one more surprise planned. But you'll have to wait until next month for that one. Grace laughed through her tears. More surprises? I don't know if my heart can take it. This one will be worth it, Thomas promised. I guarantee it. And as they walked back to join their family, both of them felt certain that whatever the future held, they would face it together. They had found each other through tragedy and had built something beautiful through kindness, hope, and love. And that was a foundation strong enough to last a lifetime. December arrived with the first snowfall of the season, dusting Portland in white and making the city look like something from a postcard. Grace stood at the window of her new home office, watching Oliver build a snowman in the backyard with Thomas, and felt a sense of contentment she had never imagined possible. The Second Chances Foundation's new building had opened 2 weeks earlier with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by the mayor, local business leaders, and dozens of community supporters. The first floor housed offices for Grace and her growing staff of counselors, job coaches, and case managers. The second floor had meeting rooms, classrooms for job training workshops, and a large community space. The third floor contained 6 fully furnished apartments for program participants. 25 families were now part of Second Chances, and the waiting list had grown to over 50. Grace had hired Jennifer, who had completed nursing school and was working part-time at the hospital, to serve as the foundation's health coordinator. Daniel had joined the team as the financial literacy instructor. Amy, who had graduated from community college with a degree in social work, was now a case manager. The cycle of paying it forward was working exactly as Grace had envisioned. But today was not about work. Today was special for another reason, though Grace did not yet know why. Thomas had been mysterious all week, telling her to keep her schedule clear for this evening. He had arranged for Caroline to babysit Oliver overnight, which had made Grace both curious and nervous. As evening approached, Thomas appeared at her office door looking handsome in a dark green sweater and slacks. Ready to go. Where are we going? Grace asked, grabbing her coat. You'll see, Thomas said with a secretive smile. He drove them to the waterfront, to the exact spot where they had sat on a bench months ago when Grace had first told him she was falling in love with him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and purple. Christmas lights twinkled along the riverside path, and snow continued to fall gently around them. Thomas led Grace to their bench and asked her to sit. Then he knelt in the snow in front of her. Grace's hands flew to her mouth. Thomas. Grace Mitchell, Thomas began, his voice thick with emotion. A year ago, you ran into a burning building and saved my son's life. You gave me back the person I love most in this world. But you gave me so much more than that. You reminded me how to hope. You showed me that even in our darkest moments, there are still people who will act with courage and kindness. You taught me that second chances are possible, that love can grow from tragedy, that purpose can emerge from pain. Tears were streaming down Grace's face as Thomas continued. You've built an incredible life from nothing. You've helped dozens of people find their way back from homelessness. You've become an amazing partner and a wonderful mother figure to Oliver. You've taught me that true strength is not about never falling. It's about getting back up and helping others do the same. Grace, I love you more than I ever thought possible. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me. Will you marry me? He opened a small blue box to reveal a beautiful ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light and sparkled like stars. Grace could barely speak through her tears. She had spent so many years believing her life was over, that she would never love or be loved again, that she had used up all her chances at happiness. And now this incredible man was kneeling in the snow, offering her a future full of love and hope and family. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Thomas stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Around them, people who had been walking past stopped to clap and cheer. Grace laughed through her tears, feeling more joy than her heart could contain. I have one more surprise, Thomas said, pulling out his phone. He pressed a button, and suddenly the large screen on a nearby building lit up with a video. Grace watched in shock as Oliver's face appeared on the screen. He was at Caroline's apartment, grinning at the camera. Hi, Miss Grace. Daddy wanted me to tell you something. I love you so much. You're the best. And I really, really want you to be my mom forever. Please say yes to Daddy. Please, please, please. The video cut to Caroline, who was smiling warmly. Grace, you're the sister I never knew I needed and the friend who changed my life. I'm so happy to officially welcome you to our family. We love you. Then the video showed clips from the past year. Grace working at the childcare center, laughing with Oliver, speaking at Second Chances events, looking happy and healthy and alive. At the end, text appeared on the screen. From invisible to invaluable. From homeless to hero. From broken to beloved. This is the power of second chances. Grace was sobbing now, overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding her. Thomas held her close and whispered, You're not alone anymore, Grace. You have a family. You have a purpose. You have a future. And we're all so blessed to have you in our lives. They sat on the bench together, watching the snow fall and the lights twinkle, both of them reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Grace looked at the ring on her finger and thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 year. A year ago, she had been sleeping under a bridge, cold and hungry and hopeless. She had felt invisible, worthless, like a burden that society wanted to ignore. She had genuinely believed her life was over and that she would die on the streets, unmourned and forgotten. But then she had heard a child crying in a burning building, and something inside her had awakened. She had found the courage to act, to matter, to make a difference. And that one act of bravery had set in motion a chain of events that had transformed her entire existence. She had gained a home, a career, a purpose, and a family. She had built a foundation that was helping others find their second chances. She had learned to love again, to trust again, to hope again. She had discovered that even after losing everything, it was possible to rebuild something beautiful. What are you thinking about? Thomas asked softly. I'm thinking about divine favor, Grace said. About how sometimes when we're at our lowest, that's when we're positioned for our greatest blessing. I had to lose everything to find my true purpose. I had to experience homelessness to understand how to help others escape it. I had to face my deepest fears to find my greatest courage. And I had to go through all of that darkness to appreciate this light. Thomas kissed her temple. You're remarkable. You know that. I'm just someone who got a second chance and decided to make the most of it, Grace replied. And who wants to give that same gift to as many people as possible. They drove back to Thomas's house, no, their house now, where Caroline and Oliver were waiting. When they walked through the door, Oliver ran to Grace and hugged her legs tightly. Did you say yes? Are you gonna be my mom? Grace knelt down and cupped Oliver's face in her hands. Yes, sweet boy. I said yes. I'm going to be your mom, if that's okay with you. It's more than okay. Oliver shouted, throwing his arms around her neck. It's the best thing ever. Caroline hugged both Grace and Thomas. Welcome to the family, officially. I'm so happy for all of you. They celebrated with sparkling cider and cake, sharing stories and making plans for the wedding. Grace wanted something simple but meaningful, probably in the spring when the city would be blooming with flowers. She wanted to invite everyone who had been part of her journey, the volunteers from the community center, the families from Second Chances, the people who had supported her transformation. As the evening wound down and Oliver fell asleep on the couch, Grace and Thomas sat together by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and feeling grateful for everything they had built together. "I can't wait to marry you," Thomas said quietly. "I can't wait to officially make you part of this family and spend the rest of my life loving you." "I can't wait either," Grace replied. "You saved my life, Thomas. You and Oliver and Caroline, you all saved me when I had given up on myself. You saw value in me when I felt worthless. You gave me a second chance when I thought I had used up all my chances. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." "No," Thomas said firmly. "You saved yourself, Grace. You're the one who found the courage to run into that fire. You're the one who accepted help when it was offered. You're the one who built second chances from the ground up. You're the one who turned your pain into purpose. All I did was recognize your worth. You did all the hard work of believing in yourself and rebuilding your life." Grace thought about that and realized he was right. Yes, Thomas and Caroline and Rachel and many others had helped her. But ultimately, she had made the choice to accept that help, to do the work, to fight for her own recovery. She had saved herself. And that made the victory even sweeter. 6 months later, on a beautiful spring day in April, Grace and Thomas were married in an outdoor ceremony at Washington Park. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, creating a canopy of pink and white flowers overhead. Over 200 people attended: family, friends, colleagues, Second Chances participants and graduates, community center volunteers, and even some of the staff from the hotel where Grace had stayed during those first transformative weeks. Oliver served as ring bearer, proudly carrying the rings down the aisle. Caroline was Grace's maid of honor, standing beside her best friend with tears of joy in her eyes. Rachel read a poem about hope and new beginnings. Jennifer and Daniel and Amy sat in the front row, living proof of the power of second chances. As Grace walked down the aisle in a beautiful tea-length dress in deep blue, no black allowed, she looked out at all the faces of people who had supported her journey. She saw the mayor, who had declared a Second Chances Day in Portland in honor of the foundation's work. She saw business owners who had hired program participants. She saw volunteers who donated their time and donors who funded the mission. She saw the community that had formed around a shared belief that everyone deserves kindness, hope, and a fresh start. When she reached the altar and took Thomas's hands, she felt complete. This was her family now. This was her purpose. This was her life, a life she had rebuilt from ashes, a life full of meaning and love and service to others. The officiant spoke about the couple's journey, about how tragedy had brought them together and how hope had kept them together. He talked about the power of kindness to transform lives and the importance of paying blessings forward. Then it was time for the vows. Thomas went first, his voice steady despite his emotions. "Grace, when you saved Oliver's life, you saved mine too. You taught me that even in our darkest moments, there are angels among us. You showed me that true heroism is not about being fearless, it's about acting despite your fears. I promise to spend the rest of my life honoring your courage, supporting your dreams, and loving you with everything I have. I promise to be your partner, your biggest fan, and your safe place to land. I promise to help you continue the amazing work you're doing to change lives. And I promise to remind you every single day how valuable, how worthy, and how deeply loved you are." Grace was already crying as she began her vows. "Thomas, you saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You gave me hope when I had given up. You offered me help without judgment or conditions, and you treated me with dignity and respect when others saw me as a problem to be ignored. You gave me back my life, and then you helped me build something even better than what I had before. I promise to love Oliver as my own son and to be the best mother I can be to him. I promise to support your vision and your dreams. I promise to continue building a foundation that helps others the way you helped me. And I promise to never take a single day for granted, because I know how precious this life is and how blessed I am to share it with you." There was not a dry eye in the audience as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. When Thomas kissed Grace, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Oliver ran up and hugged both of them, officially completing their family. The reception was held at the Second Chances Foundation building, which had been decorated with flowers and lights. There was dancing and laughter and joyful celebration. Grace's wedding cake was donated by a local bakery whose owner had heard her story and wanted to contribute to her happiness. The catering was provided by a restaurant whose manager had once been homeless and understood the importance of second chances. During the reception, Grace took the microphone to make a speech. 1 year ago today, I was living on the streets. I was broken, hopeless, and ready to give up. I felt like my life had no value, no purpose, no future. But then I heard a child crying, and something inside me woke up. I ran into a burning building not knowing if I would survive, but knowing that I had to try. And that one act of courage changed everything. She looked at Thomas, who was watching her with love in his eyes. It brought me to this man, who saw past my circumstances and recognized my worth. It brought me to this family, who welcomed me with open arms. It brought me to this community, which rallied around a stranger and helped her find her way back to life. And it brought me to this foundation, which now helps others find their second chances. Grace's voice grew stronger as she continued. I want everyone here to know that no matter how lost you feel, no matter how broken your life seems, there is always hope. There are always people who will help if you're brave enough to accept it. There are always second chances waiting if you're willing to do the work. My life is proof that you can lose everything and still rebuild something beautiful. You can experience tragedy and still find joy. You can be invisible and still be seen. You can fall to the very bottom and still rise again. She gestured to the Second Chances graduates scattered throughout the crowd. These amazing people have walked the same journey I walked. They've experienced loss, hardship, and homelessness. But they accepted help when it was offered. They did the hard work of rebuilding. And now they are standing on their own feet, living stable lives, and preparing to help others. This is what happens when kindness meets courage. This is what happens when we refuse to give up on each other. This is the power of second chances. The room erupted in applause. Grace raised her glass for a toast. To everyone who helped me along the way, thank you. To everyone who is still struggling, there is hope. To everyone who has found their second chance, pay it forward. And to my husband Thomas and my son Oliver, you are my greatest blessing, and I will love you forever. Here's to new beginnings, to unexpected families, and to the beautiful life we're building together. As glasses clinked and people cheered, Grace looked around the room one more time, taking in every detail. She saw Rachel laughing with Caroline. She saw Jennifer dancing with her children. She saw Daniel talking with potential employers about hiring more second chances graduates. She saw volunteers from the community center, donors who believed in the mission, and city officials who had supported the foundation's growth. And she saw Thomas walking toward her with Oliver's hand in his, both of them smiling at her with pure love and joy. This was her life now. This was her family. This was her purpose. And it was more than she had ever dared to dream possible. Later that evening, after the reception had ended and Oliver had gone home with Caroline for the night, Thomas and Grace returned to their house. They sat on their back porch, just as they had done so many times before, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Happy? Thomas asked, pulling Grace close. More than I ever thought possible, Grace replied, resting her head on his shoulder. I keep thinking about that day a year ago when I ran into the fire. I was so scared. I didn't know if I would survive. But I knew I had to try. And that moment of courage led to all of this. To you, to Oliver, to the foundation, to this life. It's like everything terrible I went through was preparing me for this moment. Thomas kissed the top of her head. You know what the best part is? This is just the beginning. We have our whole lives ahead of us. We're going to grow second chances, help hundreds more people, raise Oliver together, maybe even have more children if you want. We're going to build something beautiful together. Grace turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love and hope. More children. You want that? If you do, Thomas said gently. I know it might be complicated emotionally because of Emma, but I think you would be an amazing mother again. and Oliver would love having siblings. Grace felt her heart swell. The thought of having another child both terrified and thrilled her. She would never forget Emma or try to replace her. But she could honor Emma's memory by loving other children, by being the mother she had always wanted to be. Maybe that was part of her healing too. A cold November night at a gas station parking lot in Portland, Oregon. A desperate young white woman in her early 20s with brown hair, wearing a thin blue jacket, nervously approaches a group of motorcycles at the fuel pumps. In the foreground, a large bearded white man in his 40s wearing a black leather vest with Freedom Riders MC patches stands next to his motorcycle, turning to look at her with gray eyes showing concern. Behind them, more bikers in leather vests are visible. In a car nearby, a teenage white girl with blonde hair watches through a fogged window with worried eyes. The gas station has harsh fluorescent lighting. The woman's posture shows both fear and determination. Cold mist from their breath visible in the air. Cinematic lighting with strong contrast, realistic and emotionally intense, 4K, no warm color grading. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. "Not right away. But someday. Yes." They sat in comfortable silence, both of them imagining the future they would build together. A future full of love, purpose, and service. A future where they would raise children, grow Second Chance's foundation, and continue helping people find their way back from despair. Grace thought about how far she had come in just 1 year. She thought about the scared, broken woman who had run into a burning building not knowing if she would survive. She thought about the hopeless person living on the streets who had believed her life was over. And she thought about the woman she had become, confident, purposeful, loved, and committed to making a difference. "Do you believe in divine favor?" Grace asked Thomas suddenly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you believe that sometimes God, or the universe, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, puts us through trials specifically to position us for something greater? Like, I had to go through homelessness to truly understand how to help homeless people. I had to experience loss to appreciate what I have now. I had to be invisible to learn how to see others. It's like everything terrible happened for a reason, and the reason was to bring me here, to this moment, to this purpose." Thomas thought about it. "I think terrible things happen in this world, and they are not always fair or reasonable. But I also think that what matters is what we do with those experiences. You could have stayed broken. You could have refused help. You could have given up. But you didn't. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. You took your loss and created new love. You took your worst experiences and used them to help others. That's not fate or divine intervention. That's you making powerful choices." Grace smiled. "Maybe it's both. Maybe terrible things happen, but we're also given chances to transform them into something meaningful. And when we do, that's when the real magic happens." "I like that," Thomas said, pulling her closer. "The real magic is in the transformation." As they sat together under the stars, Grace felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come full circle, from tragedy to homelessness to rescue to recovery to purpose to love. Her journey had been painful and difficult, but it had also been beautiful and redemptive. She thought about all the people whose lives had been touched by her story. The families in Second Chances who now had stable homes and jobs. The children at the Bennett Technologies Child King Center who received nurturing care. The volunteers who had found purpose in helping others. The community that had come together to support a stranger. The donors who believed in the mission. Even the people who had simply heard her story and felt inspired to be kinder, more generous, more hopeful. One act of courage in a burning building had created ripples that extended far beyond anything Grace could have imagined. She had saved Oliver, yes. But in doing so, she had also saved herself. And now she was helping save dozens of others, who would in turn help even more people. The cycle of kindness was infinite. "Thank you," Grace whispered to Thomas. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing in me. For loving me. For giving me the chance to become who I was always meant to be." "Thank you for letting me," Thomas replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to accept help. Thank you for building this incredible foundation. Thank you for loving Oliver and me. Thank you for choosing to live when it would have been easier to give up. You inspire me every single day, Grace." They kissed softly, then stood and walked back into their home, a home filled with love, laughter, and hope. Upstairs, in Oliver's room, pictures from their wedding sat on the dresser alongside photos of Jennifer and Emma, honoring the past while celebrating the present. In Grace's office, folders full of second chances applications waited for Monday morning, each one representing another person ready for their transformation. This was Grace's life now, messy, beautiful, purposeful, and full of love. She had lost everything and found something better. She had been broken and made herself whole again. She had been invisible and learned to shine. She had experienced the worst that life could offer and discovered that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. As she climbed into bed beside her husband that night, Grace said a silent prayer of gratitude. Not for an easy life, but for a meaningful one. Not for a life without pain, but for the strength to transform pain into purpose. Not for perfection, but for second chances. And as she drifted off to sleep, wrapped in Thomas's arms, feeling safe and loved and valued, Grace knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The best was yet to come. And whatever challenges the future might bring, she would face them with courage, surrounded by love, committed to helping others, and forever grateful for the unexpected kindness that had changed her life. From homeless to hero, from invisible to invaluable, from broken to beloved, from despair to hope, from tragedy to triumph. This was the power of second chances. This was the power of love. This was the power of never giving up on yourself or on others. And this was just the beginning of Grace Mitchell Bennett's beautiful story.